This video will contain spoilers for the movies Blair Witch Project and Creep. There will also be some brief discussions of sexual assault and terminal illness. One day, a farmer picked up a viper that was half dead from the cold. When the farmer had warmed the viper uncoiled and grabbed hold of the man's hand, and with a fatal bite, he killed the man who had wanted to save him. As he was dying, the man spoke some words that are well worth remembering. Well, I got what I deserve for having shown kindness to a scoundrel. The Blair Witch Project is a 1999 film written and directed by Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick. The film is shot using a found footage technique in which the characters themselves are the ones holding the camera. The Blair Witch Project is credited with popularizing this style, inspiring such films as Paranormal Activity, Cloverfield, and District 9. The film takes place in rural Maryland and follows 3 student filmmakers as they search for the legendary Blair Witch. Heather is in charge of the project, and she has recruited Mike and Josh to help with the cameras and audio recording equipment. The start of the film feels very much like a standard documentary. Heather interviews some locals about the legend of the Blair Witch. Some believe in it, and some are skeptical. Several children went missing in the 1940s, and many believe the Blair Witch is responsible. One local mentions a serial killer that lived in the area.
I remember Mr. Parr was an old hermit.
Right.
And he lived up on a mountain. He had a place up there. The police finally went up on the mountain, and they searched his house, and they found the bodies of 7 kids from the area.
Even so, Heather eagerly pushes the supernatural narrative when interviewing the locals. She seems unconcerned with skeptics.
Do you believe in witchcraft?
No.
No?
No, sir.
Are you a religious man?
Yep.
Alrighty.
The crew starts their hike to find a cemetery in the woods described by the legend. Before long, it starts to rain, and the crew is forced to set up camp. In the night, Josh claims to hear cackling outside the tent. The next day, tensions escalate. Josh and Mike start to lose faith in Heather. They're convinced they are lost and blame Heather for it. Mike and Heather have an all-out argument, and Mike says that he doesn't trust Heather anymore.
Although I gotta tell you, I don't fully trust you.
They find a bunch of rock piles in the forest, which they believe to be the cemetery. They get the footage they need and camp out for the night. The next day, the crew starts the return trip to where they parked. There's more arguing, and Mike and Josh stop talking to Heather altogether. Eventually, night falls again before they're able to return to the car. They camp out for the 3rd night, and during that night, Heather hears more sounds. In the morning, they find small piles of rocks surrounding the tent. They also realize they've lost their map. The 3 argue over who is responsible. Of course, Mike and Josh blame Heather, but Heather seems to earnestly believe it was not her fault.
Did you take it?
No, I didn't take the fucking map, man.
After more walking and bickering, Mike confesses that he was so sure that Heather was lost that he decided to kick the map into the creek.
I kicked that fucking map into the creek yesterday. It was useless. I kicked that fucker into the creek.
Obviously, this causes a huge argument. Still on day 3, they find small wooden effigies hanging from trees in a clearing. This clearly freaks out Mike and Josh, but Heather is excited to have found more evidence for their documentary. After a few minutes, Mike and Josh convince Heather to stop filming and continue on toward the car. The sun sets again, and the crew is forced to set up camp for a 3rd night. During the night, the noises outside the tent have only gotten louder. All 3 run out of the tent and spend the rest of the night in the forest where they end up. In the morning, they find that the tent was ransacked overnight, so they argue about it some more. By the end of day 4, Heather is really starting to become unglued. They're still unable to find their way out of the forest and camp out once again. When Heather and Mike wake up, they are unable to find Josh. They carry on anyway, and during the next night, they hear Josh screaming in the distance. The next morning, Heather finds a bundle of sticks wrapped in bloody fabric outside the tent. The fabric appears to contain a bloody finger and some hair. This totally breaks her. The next and final night, we have the iconic Blair Witch shot. Heather is facing the camera directly, and she makes apologies to Mike and Josh, their families, and her family.
I am so sorry for everything that has happened. Because in spite of what Mike says now, it is my fault.
That night, Mike and Heather hear Josh screaming again. They run toward the voice and stumble upon an abandoned house. Searching for Josh, they make their way up to the top of the house. Once there, they hear Josh screaming in the basement. Heather rushes down only to find Josh standing stock still in the corner of the basement, just like in the legend. Something hits her from behind and she drops the camera. Roll credits. And that's it. No jump scare, no monster. All the horror of the Blair Witch Project takes place off-screen. Because the film is shot in a found footage style, we don't see anything that the characters don't see. And as far as we know, they never actually find the witch. The most they get are just implications of the witch, wooden effigies, piles of rocks, and mysterious forest noises. They never actually witness anything truly supernatural. So that begs the question, is the Blair Witch real? There's a popular interpretation of the Blair Witch Project that claims that there is no witch. The brilliance of this movie is that we never see the witch, so who's to say if one even exists? The theory is that the real villains of the film are Mike and Josh. For some reason, they take Heather into the woods, get her lost, destabilize, and ultimately kill her. It's not unusual in a story like this for the characters to start turning on each other. But this happens before the characters are even truly lost. Mike and Heather's first argument about being lost takes place on the way back to the car on day 3. Mike and Josh continually undermine Heather's authority as director of the film, as well as her ability to navigate them out of the forest.
You know exactly what's going on?
Yes. Let's just keep going.
Yeah, we'll wait 5 minutes to a map check.
And the cackling sounds during the first night aren't even caught on tape.
So you heard noises last night?
So
See,
I
the problem is
totally
I
heard
sleep
noise.
like a fucking rock.
One of them could have possibly been an owl, but the other one was like a cackling. Was a
No
definite.
way.
It was a total cackling, man.
And since Heather sleeps like a rock, it's possible that some of the nighttime hijinks were carried out by Mike and Josh while she slept. And Mike kicks the map into the creek and then lies about it. The final shot of the film is Josh in a corner with Heather facing him. The camera drops as we assume she is attacked by the witch, but again, we don't actually see a witch. At this point, Mike is behind Heather, so it's possible that he's the one who attacked her. But although we don't actually see the witch, we do get some evidence. And this complicates our theory a little bit. How do we explain the bloody body parts, or the wooden effigies? In any case, this theory is still fun to consider. By capitalizing on a vague threat that no one can even confirm exists, the real villains of the story are able to distract from their own crimes. And with this interpretation, the Blair Witch is kind of like political correctness. I always find the concept of political correctness to be weird. Does it even really exist? Those who seem most bothered by it tend to be on the less reliable side of the US media landscape. But surely they're not making up problems from whole cloth. So what is political correctness? And is it what they say it is? Now this next bit isn't really backed up by research. I'm not going to cite studies or experts on how they define political correctness. I'm just explaining what kind of boxes my brain makes to help understand it. This isn't meant to be a comprehensive definition of political correctness, but it should help establish some context for the rest of this essay. The way I see it, political correctness comes in 3 main flavors. These 3 categories may overlap, but I think it's safe to say that what we call political correctness has one of 3 purposes: to be more humane, to be more descriptive, and to push an agenda. The first 2 are pretty straightforward. Slurs are politically incorrect because they're disrespectful. Making fun of someone's immutable characteristics can be hurtful. So political correctness helps us clean up our speech to avoid offending others. The second goal of political correctness is to be more descriptive. Intentionally misgendering someone is politically incorrect not just because it's rude, but because it's dishonest. And the third goal of political correctness is the most problematic. This is the political correctness that George Orwell warned about in 1984. Limiting and controlling speech in order to influence the way people think about socio-political issues. Now, because this is the most problematic type of political correctness, this must be the one people are always complaining about, right?
The most scary thing about Halloween today is not, being scared by costumes, it's being scared to wear them because of the surveillance upon students. They're being...
If they dressed as
a
sombrero with the Mexican, and then they would be held to task.
Right. This is what they're worried about. And I'm not just cherry picking here. I watched hours of conservative pundits discussing political correctness, and the worst they could come up with was problematic Halloween costumes, offensive jokes, and cultural appropriation. Arguably, all of these fall into the first category, humanity. Avoiding costumes or jokes that may be offensive to people seems to be political correctness that is more concerned with decency than with pushing an agenda.
because I stole money from my parents. I never worked. And my one grandma says, I think we got ourselves a little Democrat down there. And I do that in Miami. People laugh and cheer. You do it in Reading, Pennsylvania? Oh, hey, oh.
Why Reading?
Well, it's a little bit more democratic.
Oh, so they don't like it.
Let's change this up a little bit. Imagine Tim Allen was a musician and he said, when I go to Kentucky and play bluegrass, they love it. But when I go to New Hampshire and I play bluegrass, they hate it. When we put it in those terms, the problem is clear. Tim Allen just doesn't know his audience. Different parts of the US have different cultures, and blaming the audience because you fail to meet their cultural values is a bit of a cop-out. It's a performer's job to understand their audience, to understand what they will and won't like. And when you tell a joke or play a song that they don't like, it's foolish to blame the audience. The audience has no secret agenda, you're just doing a bad job. So what does the third kind of political correctness actually look like? What kind of people are adjusting their speech to push an agenda?
Good afternoon, everyone. The radicals are in control of the Democrat Party.
Now, this is the kind of political correctness that Orwell warned against. Clearly, the White House is pushing an anti-left agenda by conflating moderate Democrats with the radical left. And as someone on the radical left, I really wish this was the case, but alas, Biden is not a radical leftist. What a surprise. So if folks on the right are busy lamenting the decent political correctness while engaging in the manipulative type, is this hypocrisy? Maybe. Let's take a look at another movie. I already mentioned that the Blair Witch Project inspired a number of films, including Paranormal Activity, Cloverfield, and District 9. But in all of those films, look at what we see. Monsters. Although these three franchises appear to have been inspired by the Blair Witch Project, they all fail to establish the same level of tension through withholding. Although when I say fail, I don't necessarily mean that as a bad thing. Obviously, District 9 is about humanizing the monsters, so that's not a failure so much as just a different genre. And Cloverfield is literally a monster movie, so you can't really not show the monster. Only Paranormal Activity could have gotten away with not showing something supernatural, but that's not what they did, and that's fine. But the only monsters we see in the Blair Witch Project are human, and that idea seemed to have been borrowed by a lesser-known, more recent film, Creep. Creep is a 2014 found-footage film directed by Patrick Brice. It was written by Brice and Mark Duplass, both of whom are its only actors. The film is shot for the most part by Brice's character Aaron, a freelance videographer. Aaron is hired by Joseph, an expectant father with an inoperable brain tumor. Joseph comes on really strong, insisting on hugging Aaron the first time they meet.
I feel like we should just do this right now because at the end of the day it's going to be normal, so just...
Oh, okay.
Joseph wants Aaron to follow him around and film him for the day. Since he only has months to live, he wants to create a video diary for his unborn child. And then he gets in the tub. Aaron is a little uncomfortable at first, but he keeps an open mind. Joseph appeals to Aaron's humanity. There's nothing weird about a father bathing his child, so why shouldn't they film it for the video diary? The two start gearing up for a hike, and Aaron finds a wolf mask in the closet. Joseph puts on the mask, which is of a character he calls Peach Fuzz.
Hello, my name is Peach Fuzz. I might look like I eat you up, but I'm as friendly as a rabbit. And I'd make a very good friend.
After the hike, the two men get some lunch at a nearby diner. The conversation turns serious, and Joseph confesses that he photographed Aaron without his knowledge when Aaron first arrived. The next scene takes place at the end of the day. Aaron tries to leave, but Joseph convinces him to stay for a drink. While they're drinking, Joseph tells Aaron the truth about the Peach Fuzz mask.
I went down the street to the 99-cent store. There I found a mask. It was a wolf. 3 hours later, I came back to the house. I put the mask on. I broke in through the back window. Aaron, I raped my own wife.
At this point, Aaron is thoroughly freaked out. He tries to leave but is unable to find his keys. So he discreetly drugs Aaron's whiskey. Once Aaron has passed out, Joseph continues to look for his keys but is interrupted by Joseph's ringing phone. The person calling is ostensibly Angela, Joseph's wife. But after some discussion, she reveals that she is actually Joseph's sister.
Then just walk out of there right now. Just keep walking, okay?
Am I in danger right now?
When Aaron returns to the living room, Joseph is gone. Aaron tries to leave, but Joseph is guarding the door in the peach fuzz mask. Aaron runs at Joseph, and the scene ends. Cut to Joseph carrying large garbage bags up a hill and starting to dig what we can only assume is a grave. Aaron turns the camera on himself and explains that he received this video from Joseph. Later, Aaron receives another package which was clearly dropped off by Joseph himself since it has no postage labels. The package has in it another DVD, a knife, and a wolf doll. In the DVD, Joseph explains why he loves wolves so much.
Because they love deeply, but they don't know how to express it, and they're often very violent and, quite frankly, murder the things that they love.
The next morning, Aaron wakes up to find another DVD placed in his bedroom window. On it, Joseph makes a plea to Aaron.
I don't have any friends. I have nothing, and I need somebody to talk to. And I'm hoping that your kindness is huge, and that even though I burned that bridge and you have no reason to trust me at all, that you will give me a chance to talk to you and at the very least explain myself to you.
He invites Aaron to meet in a public park so that Joseph can show Aaron who he really is. Aaron does so, and then he gets killed by Joseph. The film ends with Joseph talking to the camera.
No matter what I did to you, you believed I was good, and I would do you no harm.
This final line sums up the whole theme of the movie. Aaron was like the farmer, just trying to help someone in need, but he ultimately got bit. I guess that's what you get for showing kindness to a scoundrel. Throughout the entire film, Joseph shows Aaron just how much of a creep he is. He talks about sexual assault and murder. His sister indicated that he was unstable and dangerous, and yet, despite knowing all this about Joseph, Aaron is willing to take Joseph at his word that he just needs a friend. And of course, Joseph doesn't keep his word. Hypocrisy, simply put, is failing to practice what you preach. But does that really apply to the political correctness issue I was discussing earlier? I'm not sure it does. Although those who rail the hardest against PC culture seem to be the most guilty of political correctness, it tends to be of different types. Someone on the far right may take umbrage with political correctness when it comes to respecting people, but that doesn't necessarily make them hypocritical for pushing an agenda using political correctness of a different type. So maybe they're not being hypocrites so much as they're being scoundrels. This week's hypocrisy du jour is of course the Republican effort to confirm a Supreme Court justice before the election. In 2016, Mitch McConnell famously refused to do his job when President Obama nominated Merrick Garland for the Supreme Court.
The Senate will appropriately revisit the matter when it considers the qualifications of the nominee the next president nominates.
McConnell, as majority leader of the Senate, refused to call a vote or even hold hearings, suggesting that such a process shouldn't take place so close to a presidential election. And now, here we are, just over a month until the next presidential election. And wouldn't you know it, all of a sudden it's fine to confirm a justice in such a short time.
President Trump's nominee for this vacancy will receive a vote on the floor of the Senate.
So what changed? So it's easy to say here that McConnell is being a hypocrite, and it's certainly not wrong, but I don't think it tells the whole story. Sure, it's hypocritical to not want to confirm a justice under Obama in an election year, but then do exactly the same for Trump. But that's assuming McConnell is being honest. If we assume he's not being honest, the discrepancy is clear. He's just interested in power. He has no concern with doing the right thing or letting the voters decide. And using this rationale, he's not being hypocritical at all. President I don't like wants to nominate a justice, too close to the election. President I do like wants to do the same, that's fine. In fact, there's an argument to be made that even calling him a hypocrite is just political correctness. It's more polite than saying he's an authoritarian liar, and doing so minimizes the gravity of the matter. Imagine that Mitch McConnell killed someone, even though in the past he has said that murder is wrong. I hope you'd be much more concerned with the murder itself than with his hypocrisy. It doesn't matter if he's being a hypocrite. What he's doing is clearly wrong. A president who lost the popular vote by the entire population of Kansas, nominating a Supreme Court justice for a life term is clearly not letting the voters decide. In fact, polls are showing that voters want the nomination to be made by the winner of November's election. And with all of this, McConnell is still preparing to vote on a new nominee, despite it being explicitly against what the voters want. So no, the hypocrisy doesn't matter. McConnell knows that what he's doing is hypocritical on paper, so calling him out for it isn't going to change his mind. Calling it what it is, an authoritarian power grab, isn't going to change his mind either, but it is more descriptive and more likely to mobilize voters. So what does the radical Democrat Party plan to do about all this?
We're going to do everything we can to try to appeal to their sense of decency. That you can't just a matter of months ago, as Lindsey Graham did, say that there's a standard, say that you uphold it, tell people to use your words against you on this matter, and then have them suddenly flip and change that.
When someone gives their word, they can't just break it, so Booker plans to appeal to the GOP's sense of decency. When the farmer in the story appealed to the snake's decency, he paid for it with his life. Same happened to Aaron and Creep. Booker is wrong to conflate can't with shouldn't. In Creep, Joseph shouldn't kill Aaron, but it's naive to suggest that he can't. In the Blair Witch Project, Mike shouldn't kick the map in the creek, but he does. And in real life, McConnell shouldn't go back on his word, but he absolutely can. Ultimately, the question of hypocrisy, or should or shouldn't, is irrelevant. We are where we are. The president has already appointed a nominee, and only 2 Republican senators have said that they won't vote to confirm before the election. If all other Republican senators vote yes, the nominee will be confirmed and there will be a new Supreme Court justice with a life term. This abuse of power may be hypocritical, but it is not inconsistent. The ruling party's main priority is gaining power through any means necessary, and if they're shown too much kindness, they're going to get away with it.